we begin, I want to say a big hello, and I'm glad you're with us tonight. Thank you.
יום הולדת שמח, גם כן צריך
כן, יום הולדת שמח. לא ידעתי.
אז ערב טוב לכולם. We'll do it sort of bilingually, English and Hebrew. אני רוצה להגיד ערב טוב לכל המשתתפים הקבועים שלנו של 929. זה המפגש של חמדת ימים, פיוטי שבת, שאנחנו, אסנת בן שושן ואני כבר עושות אותו פחות או יותר מאז תחילת הקורונה, אז עכשיו יש לנו הכבוד והעונג לעשות אותו עם הרב לארי אינגלנדר.
גם כבוד לי.
והתארח בקהילת כל הנשמה עם הרב עודד מזור, אז וברוכים הבאים לכל מי שנמצא פה. We started with a medley of לך דודי.
כן, מה שאנחנו נעשה, אנחנו ננגן...
זאת אומרת, אני באנגלית ואתה בעברית, ככה זה עובד?
זהו, נכון.
אנחנו נתחיל במחרוזת של לך דודי.
כן, ואנחנו ננגן כמה מנגינות, ואם אתם מכירים איזו מנגינה, נא להרים את היד, בסדר? ואם אתם מכירים את המלחין, נא להרים שתי ידיים, okay? So for those of you in English, we're going to be playing a little bit of a melody, just instrumental, of different melodies of Lecha Dodi. If you recognize any of them, and if you've got your picture on screen, just raise a hand. If you recognize the melody, and if you also know who the composer is, you can raise two hands. Okay, so here we go.
רגע, קרלו. My flute is cold. Just a second.
The curse of a cold flute. Okay.
What did you recognize? הראשון, the first one. Anybody raise two hands? No? מה ששרים בגן הילדים, נכון? That's what we sing in nursery schools in Israel. מרדכי זעירה. Also composed many other like old Israeli songs. The second one. Everybody knows it, right? Who composed it? I have no idea.
No, in the Shirion it just says Sephardic.
Sephardic?
קצת ספק, כן. אבל, מי יודע.
אוקיי, זה אזורים מאוד צפוניים של צרפת, הייתי אומרת.
And the third one, I don't think anybody recognized.
No, Sheryl did.
Yes. That is a Canadian composer, Ben Steinberg, who was the composer in residence at Temple Sinai, Toronto for many years, and that's one of his most famous melodies, but he's written many.
And every year there's an award for the young musician Ben Steinberg Award,
Right.
and Boaz Dorot, musical manager of קהילת כל הנשמה, won that prize for 2 years.
Very nice. Yeah, it's very prestigious.
Yeah. The last one. ברוכים הבאים.
ברוכים הבאים.
The last one. La 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 la. even Boaz doesn't know who composed it. He calls it the Bulgarian melody. אתה יודע מי התחיל?
לא, אני לא יודע.
Okay, now from here we're actually going to play and sing, all right? And we'll introduce the melodies as we go along. But before we go into these, just to give a little bit of a background of Lecha Dodi itself. This was composed by Shlomo Alkabetz, who was part of a mystical chavura who lived in Tzfat, up north. And many of them came from Spain after the Inquisition. But they were a very mystical group under the early leadership of Rabbi Moshe Cordovero. Yosef Karo, the writer of the Shulchan Aruch, was one of the chavura, and Alkabetz was, of course, a poet and a songwriter, and he wrote this song. You'll notice that his name is in it. If you look at the verses, the batim, they begin with Shin, Lamed, Mem, He, Shlomo, and then the next 4 verses spell out Halevi. So he actually got his autograph right in the middle of the song. Now, if you look at the printout sheets, you'll notice that there's a statement from the Talmud that says that one rabbi used to go out into the field every Friday evening and sing, Boi Kala, welcome, O bride. And so Shabbat was viewed as a bride. What Alkabetz and the mystical circle did with that is they said that the bride is actually the Shekhinah, God's indwelling presence in the world. And so there's a little bit more going on here, which we'll explain a little bit more later on. But this first melody is one that is sung at Kehilat Darchei Noam in Ramat HaSharon. And my twin is here, my first twin, Rabbi Yehoram Mazor. So we were the first twins there. And
when he walked in, I thought it was you, actually.
Yeah, we look so much alike, I know.
We were separated on bed.
And it's great to see you too. And it's also sung at Kehilat Solel, the twin congregation in Mississauga of Kehilat Darchei Noam. And I think we are the oldest twinning relationship. It is now over 40 years that we've been together and shared, been to each other's kehilot. So this is the melody of Lecha Dodi that is sung there in many other places too.
זכור בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת לנתיבה ביחד. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה.
It feels so weird to sing this on a Monday. זה מאוד מוזר. But we have to get used to it because there's 9 stanzas.
That's right. So yeah, titragli.
Yeah, we should get used to it. On the first stanza we read, Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad. That reminds us of the two places in the Torah that the 10 Commandments are mentioned. First in the book of Exodus and then in the book of Deuteronomy. One says Shamor et Yom HaShabbat lekadsho. The other says Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekadsho. And Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad. There's a Talmudic saying about the same commandment. One said with Shamor, the other one said with Zachor. Are we going to the next stanza?
Sure.
Of course we are.
Okay. You want to say a little bit about that one?
Sure. So just like Larry mentioned before, it's the going forth towards Shabbat, going out into nature, welcoming Shabbat, לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה. סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה, this idea of God having God knows exactly what it's going to be like in the end when God first started the creation. So I wish road constructions in Jerusalem were made this way. It doesn't really work that way. אבל זה כן. Something about the melody. It's originally written by Yoni Rechter for a poem written by Natan Alterman, Erev Ironi, describing an evening in Tel Aviv. And this was adopted by Beit Tfilah Israeli in Tel Aviv. That's one of their melodies for Lecha Dodi, and we're going to do the second stanza, Likrat Shabbat, with this melody.
And if you know it or any of the melodies, please feel free to sing along with us, okay?
Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki hi mekor haverach. מראש מקדם ניסוחה הסוף מעשר מחשבה תחילה לך דודי לקראת קהלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קהלה פני שבת נקבלה.
Yoni Rechter, it's like the simplest melody that is ever written, and it's still too complicated to sing sometimes. So many very beautiful melodies. מה למשל כתב יוני רכטר? כמו דוגמה? עטור מצחך, כמו עמוד ענן, אין סוף. פשוט המון המון.
Okay.
בית שלישי.
Yes, we go to the third stanza now. And the tune that we're going to sing is one that is often sung at Kehilat Harel in Yerushalayim, and it's believed that it was written by Shlomo Carlebach. And the theme here is rather interesting because it's for a song of Shabbat. The theme is really galut. It's really the theme of exile, and you can see that one of the lines is Rav lach shevet be'emek habacha. You have sat or you have dwelled long enough in the valley of tears. And according to a passage in the Zohar, the mystical text, Emek Habacha is the dwelling of Malach HaMavet, the angel of death. And so there was a time, and certainly in the 16th century, where our people felt very much in exile, very much homeless. And so this verse gives some comfort, saying there will be a limit to this time that you will feel alienated. And here we go.
And if you know the melody, please join in.
Lecha Dodi רב לך שבט בעמק הבכה והוא יחמוד עלייכם ללכה דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה.
בבית הרביעי, we go to the fourth stanza, התנערי מעפר קומי. And we think that Lecha Dodi is a poem about Shabbat, but when we read through the whole poem, it's much more about Jerusalem, about exile, about redemption, rather than just about Shabbat. I guess the two first verses are about Shabbat, and the rest of them are not that much concerned with that topic. Many of the verses that Alkabetz composed are inspired by verses from the second part of the book of Isaiah. These are the prophecies that are written on our Haftarah portions, on this, what we call in Hebrew, not in Hebrew, in Aramaic actually, Sheva de Nechamata, the 7 weeks of consolation going from after Tisha B'Av until Rosh Hashanah. All of them are taken from chapter 40 of Isaiah and on. You can see, I think it's a little bit difficult to see it on the presentation, but on your sheets it will be easy to see which verses are taken from which places in Isaiah. The prophet speaks to Jerusalem and says, wake up, shake off your dust. Everything's going to be okay, don't worry. Things are going to improve. I just found out, Larry just told me why it's Aliyat Ben Ishai Bet Halachmi and not just David.
David HaMelech, right, yeah. Do you want me to explain why?
Of course.
Yeah, so why does it become so obscure, talking about Ben Ishai Bet Halachmi and not David HaMelech? Very simple.
Please be creative.
Oh.
Any explanations, any creative explanations?
Mystical explanations are welcome. I think the answer is he needed the rhyme.
And also the tempo of it's
yes,
so accurate
true.
With the tempo
true.
of the poem, with
That's
every
true.
hazara being accurate.
Right.
You know, he was very conscientious of that. You're right. So, shall we sing it?
Yeah, but we need to say something about the melody.
Yes.
This is a melody by Ariel Azarus, an Israeli musician, a wonderful Israeli musician who used to work a lot with the Reefer movement. His family comes from Gibraltar, and his grandfather was a cantor there. He sings some of the original melodies of those Sephardic Jews, but also composed pieces of music which are inspired by that music. And one of them is Lecha Dodi. Perhaps we can even try to teach it, but let's give it a try. Okay?
Let's play it and sing it first.
Let's play the פזמון, שכחתי את הקורס, תודה. איזה שפה קשה יש לכם, חברים. מזיעה פה ואתם נהנים, אוקיי. In Israel, they often sing it in Bavat Ain, in Rosh Ain, where Ariel used to be a member, and he very often brought his music there. So,
very nice. Okay, so now we go to the fifth stanza, Hit Orari. Now, traditionally in many synagogues, when you come to this fifth stanza, the melody may change and the tempo becomes somewhat faster. And so it's kind of like leading up to the climax of Boi Kala at the end of Lecha Dodi, when of course we stand as well. The main line here is Uri Uri Shir Daberi. Right? Uri Uri comes from Isaiah, the second Isaiah, as Mira has mentioned before, but also Shir Daberi reminds us of the Song of Deborah, the victory song that she sings in the book of Judges. So this is a very upbeat, very positive stanza. Now we've kind of left the exile behind now, and we're looking forward to future hope and joy. The melody is actually, at least the chorus, is a Bratslaver melody. I actually heard it for the very first time in the Bratslaver synagogue here in Jerusalem. And then the melodies to the verse were added later. One of them we think by Karl Bach. We're going to sing two different melodies of the verse, but the chorus itself is definitely Bratslav. Okay, here we go. Start again. La 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 chadoti likrat kala la 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 Shabbat nikabelha.
אני בגינה לא נכונה. I have the wrong melody.
Yeah, you do. That's right.
I have the wrong melody.
נכון.
Seventh Stanza. עודד, מה, אתה לא תגיד לנו משהו?
עוד שקף.
עוד שקף?
לא, זה שם במצגת לפי הסדר שלנו.
בית שישי, לא תבושי ולא תקלמי, ומה תשתוכחי ומה תהמי, בך יכסו עמי ונבנתה עיר על תילה. So it's again the same theme of Jerusalem. Hopefully it will be rebuilt, ונבנתה עיר על תילה, the city rebuilt on its ancient site. And the melody we're going to do for this one is the typical Sephardi melody. I mean, if you just go to many Mizrahi synagogues here in Jerusalem or in other places, this is what you will hear. איזה מגינה זה? מה שרים? יש אחת שהיא כמעט בכל מקום. טוב, נעזור לכם. למה שאלתי אתכם? כי אני לא מצליחה להסתכל בה עכשיו כמובן. לא, לא. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לא תבושי ולא תקלמי, מה
שבת נקבלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
And usually when it's done in those synagogues, they don't repeat the chorus. It's just the whole thing from beginning to end, and about like 3 times fast. That's because you have to get to Shabbat dinner, and if it's a Sephardic Shabbat dinner, you better get there because it's worth going to.
Seventh stanza?
אז פה הכנסתי את השקף שלי.
בואו נראה אם זה, אפשר לראות את זה יותר ברור.
כן.
לא. עוד ברור. הנה.
זה המקובלים באים מתוך הערפל.
בדיוק, משהו כזה. טוב, קודם כל תודה רבה לכם. זו הזדמנות נהדרת באמצע להגיד תודה רבה.
זה תודה על האירוח.
בשמחה גדולה, ממש ממש. הבאתי 3 בתים עם נוסח טיפה אחר ולהגיד על זה משהו, אבל לפני זה איזושהי הקדמה. אחד הדברים שאני גדלתי עליהם בבית כנסת של אבא בדרכי נועם, זה שאחד הדברים הנפלאים בלך דודי, קצת כמו באדון עולם, זה שזה יכול לעבוד עם כמעט כל מנגינה. צריך לעשות על זה פעמיים חזרה בבית כדי לוודא שזה עובד, אבל זה יכול לעבוד עם המון מנגינות. ובכל זאת, יש, אני חושב, לא רק לי, רגעים בחיים שאנחנו זוכרים איזושהי מנגינה שפתאום שמענו. I'll repeat that in English now. One of the marvelous things about Lecha Dodi is that it can fit with almost any melody, right? So if you want to talk in your Dvar Torah about something related to the Torah portion and you want to like leharim le'atzmecha, you can start with a melody that already refers. I remember when I was working here as a rabbinic student and it was the Shabbat Kitisa with Egel HaZahav and it was Shabbat Para. We sang Lecha Dodi on Old MacDonald Had a Farm because of Para and Egel HaZahav and all that, and people said that might be too much. Okay, I got the message. But I think many of us have a moment that we remember the first time we heard one melody of Lecha Dodi, and I just want to recall such a moment when I was in Uganda, in Africa, and I spent the Shabbat with the Abba Yudaya community, and I heard them singing Lecha Dodi. Lecha Dodi lakrati kala, pani Shabbati nakabila. So obviously when they learned how to sing it, they didn't have someone to teach them the accurate pronunciation, but the kavanah was totally there, and a beautiful Ugandan melody to it. So I just want to invite you to think of a moment when you first heard a melody of whatever to Lecha Dodi that still remains with you wherever you go. You think of that melody, maybe, but that's up to you. Maybe we can ask people to share about their melodies. But about these 3 verses of Lecha Dodi, we sang a few moments ago the verse of Hitna'ari me'afar kumi. And you spoke about why doesn't it say David HaMelech, but it does say Al Yad ben Ishai bet Alachmi. That's very messianic for a Reformed congregation, right? We're not saying David HaMelech, David Mashiach ben David, but we are talking about redemption coming through David HaMelech or one of his sons arriving. So I offered an alternative line there that is from the Haftarah that we read on Yom Kippur morning, when the prophet says, Hazet som evcharehu, is that what I want from you to repair by fasting? No. Halofaros lara'ev lachmecha, give bread to a hungry person. So instead of Aliyad ben Yishai bet alachmi, Aliyad paros lara'ev lachmi. Okay? Stays with the lachmi at the end, but instead of a person whose origins are from Bethlehem, it's about us sharing our bread. Another one is from the verse that we are now arriving to, the seventh one. Do we all know what Meshisa in Hebrew means? Like when it's like when an angry farmer sends his dogs to tear apart someone who's entered their gardens, their fields. זה לשסות in Hebrew. So, והיו למשיסה שוסייך, may those who try to tear you apart be themselves torn apart. So I hope instead for something else, which is those who והיו למנוסה שונאייך, those who hate you, may they run away. It's again trying to be with the same letters and the same rhyme at the end, but instead of asking for those who hate us to be torn apart, maybe just walk away from us. That could be enough. At the same verse, we sing Kimsos Chatan al Kala. Right? I think in our LGBTQ egalitarian atmosphere, it's not only the groom that is happy with his bride, the bride might be happy with her groom, right? Should be so. And it might be a groom and a groom and a bride and a bride. So instead of Kimsos Chatan al Kala, maybe they are not totally accurate with the Sephardi tempo of the sentences, but it could be Kimsos Chatan ve Kala together in an equal way between them, or maybe it's a Chatan with another Chatan and a Kala with another Kala. And the last one, returning again in the eighth stanza, to talking about the Mashiach ben David, but here it's Al Yad Ish ben Parzi, because we just read on Megillat Ruth on Shavuot, right? The lineage coming from Ruth and Boaz, leading to David. We have Peretz, right? So when we say Ish ben Parzi, we're referring again to the house of David. So instead of that, Al Yad Geulat Kol Yoshvei Arzi. Redemption to all who live in God's land. So these are my suggestions. These three verses with the alternative version appear in the Shlosha Regalim prayer book that we published a few years ago. In a slightly different way, it's also in Tfilat HaAdam, because just in every new Reform Siddur, every previous change was re-debated, re-discussed, and it wasn't accepted exactly as it is. Two of them are there, two others are a bit different, but the concept of, but there was an argument about it, because our teacher, Rabbi Professor Dalia Marx, does not love it when we take a song that we know who the composer of was and change the lyrics of. But I prefer singing and praying words that I totally agree with, rather than saying, oh, that's what Al-Kabetz wrote. So these are the three verses with my suggestion for rethinking about them and maybe singing them in a slightly different way. דרך חדשה לחשוב על הפסוקים של אחד דודי, ואיך, כמו עם כל התפילה שלנו, למצוא מילים שיותר מדויקות לכוונה.
תודה רבה לכם.
Thank you. Wow, that added so much. Thank you, Oded, Rabbi Mezor. So now we come to the seventh stanza, and the part that I want to concentrate on is what Rabbi Mezor was just talking about. Yasis alayich Elohayich kimsos chatan al kala. May God rejoice over you the way a groom rejoices over a bride. And there's a reading, I think it's number 4 on your sheets, which comes from the Zohar, which says that there's a pun in the Hebrew, which is ledorotav, or ledorotam to ledirotam, from your generations to your dwellings. And the idea that the Zohar brings out is that every Shabbat we should make our dwelling suitable for a bride and a groom or a groom and a groom, a bride and a bride, to meet each other. And of course, this is a very special time when they're about to be married, and it should be a very festive and a very beautiful dwelling that we have on Shabbat. There's another part to this, though, which is that in the mystical tradition, which of course Alkabetz was a member of, it's also a divine wedding. And there are different aspects of God. Some are male, some are female. And what he's referring to here is kind of a marriage within the Sfirot, within the Godhead itself, between HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy Blessed One, who is male, with the Shekhinah, which is female. And when these two Sfirot merge with each other or blend with each other, it means that the flow of divine energy will come smoothly all the way through the Sfirot and will pour upon us on Shabbat, giving us that extra spirit, that Neshama Yetera that we speak of on Shabbat. Not a bad trick if you can pull it off, but that's basically what Alkabetz is referring to here. And using Rabbi Mazor's idea of looking at same-sex couples, we could really play with that and talk about the different sfirot within. There's lots of sfirot to choose from, and we could probably work that out as well. But in the meantime, the melody that we're going to play may not be familiar to many of you, but it's written by Cantor Charles Osborne, who is now the resident cantor at Temple Sinai. Sorry, my Canadian bias is coming through here this evening. And there's a little musical trick that he plays in this arrangement, which Rabbi Chobab will explain after we sing it. So here we go. I hope you enjoy it.
לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה והיו שבטה של סהי ורחקו חומבה להי יסיס עלייך אלוהי תבסוס חתן הכלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה ביחד לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה
אז מירה, מה הטריק?
אז קודם כל נגיד שצ'ארלס אוסבורן, he composed the Psalms, our 150 Psalms have so many beautiful melodies, and I think that he composed the best melody ever for a psalm, which is Psalm 122, שמחתי ואומרים לי, בית אדוני ללך, עומדות היו רגלינו בשערייך ירושלים. It's always done in rabbinical ordinations when we just see over the large glass windows of Merkaz Shimshon, the walls of the ancient city of Jerusalem. Beautiful melody. רגע, אני צריכה למצוא את הטריק. The thing is that it echoes another melody which is sung just before Lecha Dodi, which is Psalm 29. Okay? מזמור לדוד. כמו בן רמים, and it's right here.
יסיס עלייך אלוהי כמסוס חתן הכלה.
So I assumed that it was not a coincidence. So when Cantor Osborne sent us this melody, so I wrote back to him and I asked, is this intentional? And he wrote back something like, I have my moments. So he did have his moment, and it's sort of reminding us of some other part of the prayer. It's כמו יסיס עלייך. Oops. תפסנו אותו.
Okay, bite.
Okay. בית שמיני. ימין ושמאל תפרוצי ואת אדוני תעריצי על יד איש בן פרצי ואני שמחה ונגילה. Again, we have this reference to that שושלת, the lineage of King David. And I think it's also, we started with Shabbat, we then went to exile and destruction, and now we're gradually changing the atmosphere, and it becomes more and more optimistic towards the end of the poem. So we're going to do one of the melodies which nobody knows who composed, and Boaz calls it the Bulgarian melody, just so that we can remember which one it is. I don't know if it's Bulgarian or not, אבל זה אפשר לבדוק שנייה אחת. אני צריכה את sort of last name.
Got it? Okay.
I got it.
Here we go.
לך דודי לקראתה, הנה שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראתה, הנה שבת נקבלה. ימין ושמאל תפרוצי ואת אדוני תעריצי על יד איש בן פרצי ושמחה ונגילה. לך דודי לקראתה, הנה שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראתה, הנה שבת נקבלה.
זה באמת
זה ימין ושמאל? למה זה ימין ושמאל?
ימין is small because of Israeli elections. I mean, it's yeah, that's
V'chol kivun, I think, is the basic idea. Like Yama v'kei matzafona v'negba, right? That you will spread out in all directions.
I think it's also a quote from Isaiah, but I'm not sure. I think it also comes from one of the Consolation haftarot, but I'm not a 100%.
If anybody has Rabbi Google with you, you can look it up. Yes. Okay. And now we come to Bait Tish'i, the 9th stanza, which Rabbi Oded Mazor has some personal connection with, I guess. Do you want to say anything about it?
Well, it's the congregational connection. I think when people think of melodies in Kol HaNeshama, that's what they think about. And when people want to say, oh, let's sing Lecha Dodi in that melody, it's referred to as the Kol HaNeshama melody. But to what I was able to inquire so far, Rabbi Levi brought this melody from the Hopi tribe of the Native Americans in North America. It's a Hopi tribe melody that Levi adopted to Lecha Dodi because, as we said before, any melody can work with the Lecha Dodi. And we see that for decades now it works in Kol HaNeshama. So
Sure. And many other places.
And many other places too.
All right, so, of course, we hope you'll sing along with this one. Here we go.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala, yalla, 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 k'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, yalla, 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 k'nei Shabbat nekabela. Boi b'shalom aterem balat, gam b'simcha u'zola, toch emunei am segula, boi kala, lecha dodi likrat kala, yalla, 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 k'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, yalla, 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 k'nei Shabbat nekabela.
So we've gone through our 9 melodies for the 9 verses. In a moment, we're going to ask you if you have any that you would like to add to what you've heard. Let me just finish one thing, and then Rabbi Mazor will go to you. I want to suggest there's 3 themes that kind of develop all the way through Lecha Dodi. We start with bracha, which is blessing. And even though sometimes we may not be in the best place, geographically or emotionally. Nevertheless, we know that we always receive bracha, we always receive God's blessing. And this brings us hope and encouragement. The second theme is nechama, comfort, consolation. And so that even when there have been times in our history when we have been oppressed, when we have been mekupachim, when we have been the underdogs, we know that God is still with us and will give us comfort, even in those times. And then finally, that reaches a climax with the third theme of Geula, with redemption, where finally the song just bursts forth into joy and rejoicing. And we know that we have come home. We have come home to God. We have come home to our homeland. We have come home to Klal Yisrael. And all this is embraced in Lecha Dodi, from bracha to nichama to geula. And what a wonderful way to begin Shabbat. And this is the gift that Lecha Dodi gives to us. By the way, it was also the Tzfat Kabbalists who introduced the whole Kabbalat Shabbat service to Friday evening. All right, so all that material, most of it, before the Baruch Hu, is something that they put in order to make sure that you would build up to this climax of welcoming Shabbat. Rabbi Mazor?
I would like to tell you about a special Echad that I sang in Moscow. That Friday, I was teaching in Moscow, and on that Friday...
Do you want to come here so people can hear you?
Okay.
And see.
Okay. On that Shabbat morning, my student took me to the Red Square, to the mausoleum of Lenin, and in the evening we had Kabbalat Shabbat, and I was contemplating about which melody we are going to use, and I decided, and it was going like this. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. The international, the Communist Anthem. And what happened is that in the first moment, my students didn't understood exactly what was going on, and when they realized it was the international, they were running one after the other to the toilets because they couldn't hold the body, and they were peeing in the pants.
אז זה המגינה ל-1 במאי?
בדיוק.
זה גם המנגינה ל-1 במאי, כן.
זה המגינה ל-1 במאי. When we, my congregation, רמות שלום in באר שבע, they're not too fond of my changing melodies, but I keep doing it nevertheless. I sort of experimenting on human beings. And we always change the melody according to the closest Chag. So before Purim, Lecha Dodi is רגע, שנייה.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala.
לא אחד אחר, תכף. לפני פסח זה Lecha Dodi likrat kala, בני שבת נקבלה, זה שמחה רבה. ובאלול זה בדרך כלל אדון הסליחות. So we keep playing with the holidays, with the music. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. That's the Adar. That's the Adar melody. Can and.
אבל היום יום 4 ביולי.
וואו. רגע, תן לי לחשוב על זה רגע.
Lecha Dodi
לקראת קלה, בני שבת לך דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה, בני שבת נקבלה. Oh, Canada.
Yeah, okay. Any others that anybody have they want to share?
What's the occasion you would use it for?
Do you have one? Yes.
I don't have another melody. I just want to give it an.
Do you want to come up so people can hear you, if you don't mind?
You can do it, you can do it.
I just wanted to say, back in the mid-90s, years ago, when you were a baby, up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, B'nai Jeshurun and the Carlebach Shul, while Carlebach was still with us. So these melodies were coming into being, and also because in the B'nai Jeshurun, the rabbis there were from Argentina. They brought a lot of enthusiasm with them, and of course the Carlebach Shul, Shlomo Carlebach had enough enthusiasm. And so many of the melodies, what you call the Kol Neshama melody, and several what you call the Carlebach melodies. I remember when we were all back there and learning them. At the very, very beginning, I remember they would say, okay, you will sing this line. You know, there was some sort of a back and forth. And everybody was so excited, and then they introduced the dancing, and everybody was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. And then, of course, this is everywhere now. So I just wanted to
Thank you,
share it.
thank you, thank you. And I'm sure Shlomo Alkabetz would be proud of that, yes? Yes. Okay.
And any melodies that, special melodies that you remember?
Yeah.
We've done,
I can't
There's
sing it, but I heard it done to take me out to the ball game. Before a group of my congregation was going to a ball game.
Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nikabla. Yeah, it works for that too. Yeah. Yes.
When Erev Shabbat comes in Sylvester, we can't help it. We do the Scottish Nusa, you know, the Scottish Nusa.
Come sing it.
You know.
Lo Don Olam.
We do it for Don Olam too, that's why I get mixed up. Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala
pnei Shabbat. It's grand.
But do you know this? I don't think this is Carlebach. I think we tend to go into this at Vahayu Limshisa Shosai. Vahayu Limshisa Shosai Virakatu Mevalai Yasis Alai Elai Kimsos Chata Vekala Vekadodi. Yeah, he didn't sing this. Ikrat Kala Pnei Shabbat Pnei Shabbat Pnei Shabbat.
Yofi, Yofi. Thank you, Rabbi Bronstein. Okay. So we can wind up, I think.
Yeah, we can wind up. רצינו להגיד, אני רוצה קודם כל להגיד תודה רבה ל-929 על הבמה הזאת, שמאפשרת לנו, יש לנו עוד טורונטאים פה.
כן?
כן, גם סטיבן וייס כאן, ווואו, זה מאוד, ומירה, וזה מרגש לראות את כולם. אז אני רק רוצה להגיד תודה רבה ל-929 על הבמה, ותודה רבה לקהילת כל הנשמה ולרב עודד על האירוח. וזה הכל קורה בגלל שהיינו אמורים לעשות את הדבר הזה בוועידה של התנועה הרפורמית בשפיים, אבל הקורונה החליטה משהו אחר, ואז דווקא יצא בסדר, לא? חוץ מזה שהיית חולה בקורונה, חוץ מזה הכל טוב.
And to give credit, this was all Mira's idea. For several years now, we've been studying together pretty well every week, once a week. We've studied everything. Mira said she wanted to learn more about Kabbalah. So we started studying the Zohar, right? We just decided that if we ever understood anything, we probably had the wrong idea, right? We just kept going. But from this, we kind of have developed this idea, and when we knew that the Ve'idah was coming up, and that Cheryl and I were going to be coming for it, and looking forward very much to it, Mira had the idea that maybe we should do this shiur. So we want to thank you again for letting us do this reprise the way we really wanted to do it in the first place.
not on Zoom. אולי אנחנו נסיים אבל במנגינה אחת אחרונה לבואי ושלום. שרים הרבה פעמים על ערב של שושנים. ועודד, אם אתה דיברת על מנגינה אחת שככה צרובה בזיכרון, אני בסיטואציות בית כנסת מסוימות, בואי בשלום, שרים את הבית האחרון על ערב של שושנים, אני נשבעת לך שאני רואה את השבת נכנסת. אני פשוט רואה אותה נכנסת. זאת אומרת, אני בטוחה לגמרי שהיא, זהו, עכשיו היא פה, ואז אני גם יכולה ללכת הביתה. הערבית זה באמת כבר לא מעניין אותי. כאילו, זה כבר אפשר ללכת. לא נורא, נוסע. גם בעברית זה לא נורא. בואי בשלום, עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי כלה, בואי כלה. שבת שלום לכולם. תודה רבה לכולם.
תודה שבאתם. May this coming Shabbat be a humdinger for you.
מחר ב9:15. הודעות בדיוק.